And the hits just keep on coming. So, yeah, on the heels of the whole change to the terms of service that happened with YouTube that I already did a video on, link up there, it's now becoming clearer exactly what might start happening as we get nearer to COPPA coming into effect. So, I got a background and explain before I even get into any of this. So COPPA, C-O-P-P-A, it's an acronym. I don't remember what it's for. What it is this is federal regulation that is designed to protect children from certain types of entertainment that would be considered or feared to be harmful to them. It's actually not a new law. It's been on the books for a couple of decades now. The thing is, it gets updated and refreshed every 10 years. It actually wasn't scheduled to get updated for a couple more years, but pressure from parents groups around YouTube specifically pushed things forward, and it is revisions, I think, were made public. The whole thing is still in the sort of public commenting phase of the entire thing, and there's it's not finalized, but effectively this will go into effect on January 1st. So that's the first thing that needs to be explained. Even though I'm talking about this through the lens of YouTube, unlike the terms of service agreement, YouTube has no control over this. YouTube has a certain amount of control in terms of how they are going to try and keep everybody compliant with this, but this is not YouTube's rules. This is federal law, which actually means it is much higher stakes than the terms of service was. And I know that sounded like high stakes because people were concerned about losing their channels. Trust me, stakes are actually higher on this. So, what is COPPA intending or designed to do, the new things being added to it? Well, basically, it is requiring that things intended to be marketed towards or which hold an appeal for a child audience be designated as being that, and then doing so will kick a few things into place. It'll do things like disable notifications going out to your subscribers that the video has gone online. It's going to reduce ad revenue because the kinds of advertisements that can be run on children-oriented programming is much more limited. So it's going to cut into that. And some people, if you have any videos up on YouTube, you have probably received a notice that you need to mark both your channel and your videos as to whether or not they are for kids. So, again, the intention of this is to help ensure that what kids are seeing is stuff that is okay for them to see. The problem has to do with how broadly this thing is currently written, which, again, was also the problem with the YouTube terms of service issue. I'm not going to break it down into specific wordings on this the way I did on that, because this is federal law legalese, which I'm not as good at deciphering as I was with the terms of service stuff. So in this case, I am relying a bit more on summations and articles that I read about it. Normally, I'd be going more to the source, but like, it's long and it's complicated and it's clumsily written, and I don't think I would get any more out of trying to decipher that than what other people already have. So, if I already mentioned, if a piece that you've made is intended for kids or appeals to kids, keep an eye on that phrase, we'll come back to that, then it needs to be marked as such. And as I said, that is going to negatively impact that video and probably your channel. So the issue then becomes, well, what if I don't mark it? What if I didn't make something for kids? Well, your intended audience doesn't matter, because if it is believed that the video that you have made holds appeal for children and would draw them in as an audience, even if it is not your intention to speak to them, that still needs to qualify as being children's entertainment and subject to the same restrictions. Now, that sounds ridiculous, and it kind of is, but the problem is there isn't a lot of room for nuance and context on this. So there are a lot of different kinds of channels very freaked out about this, because it's obviously going to impact any channel, aimed at kids or not, that is discussing primarily or exclusively children's media. So things that discuss animated movies intended for kids, things that discuss toys or toy collecting or unboxing, things on, squishies or slime, a lot of crafting channels. They have appeal for kids, even if they're not designed for kids. And all these places are going to be subject to this. Now, what if you don't mark something as being intended for kids? Either because you don't believe that it should be, or you're thinking, well, I just won't mark that as for kids. Then it's all good, right? Well, no. No, because if the video ever gets reviewed, and that, first of all, let's clarify, that is a big if. The FCC, which is the organization behind this, they do not have the manpower to analyze and look at every single video that's on YouTube. They just don't. So this is a big if. It's a bit like speeding in your car. Doing it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be caught, because not every road is being monitored at all times by town cops or the highway patrol or whatever. But if you do get caught, it's not going to go well for you. And it's the same kind of thing here. So if you do not have a video, if you have a video that is not marked as being for kids, and it is determined by the FCC that it does hold appeal for kids, or if they believe you are intending it for kids, again, whether or not you say you're intending it doesn't matter. They will make that decision for themselves. Then you personally are subject to fines of up to and over $40,000 per incident, per violation. So, what this means is, like I said, a lot of YouTubers are scrambling and panicking right now in terms of setting all their existing content to be marked as for kids, which I've already had to do. I lost count of how many I did. I went back through and basically marked everything where I talked about, discussed, or reviewed anything that was aimed at children. So basically nearly every Animation Junkie episode, and anytime I talked about She-Ra, anytime my review of The Lion King, anything like that, I have gone in and manually marked it as being for kids, even though kids are never my intended audience. They never have been. I still need to do that, because to fail to do that opens me up to massive liability of getting fined and just buried into the ground by it. Because the FCC, and they have been asked directly about this, has been asked if they are going to hold individual creators accountable, or if they are going to target the platform holders, which is YouTube, which has already happened. YouTube had to settle with the FCC, I think it was last year. Maybe it was earlier this year, I can't remember. But they've already targeted the platform holders. Now they have actually said, yes, we will fine creators. So people need to err on the side of caution very, very strongly. Now, what does that mean in terms of content? New content being created, because it's one thing to mark your existing stuff, but this could effectively put many YouTubers, even some very sizable and popular ones, more or less out of business, because it is going to eat into what their reach so much, because marking it as something being for kids is going to limit its scale and scope and limit the ad revenue. And it's gonna kill a lot of these places. And again, not necessarily because that was the design or the intention, but it is going to be the fallout. And I think it is more than clear that the FCC does not care. Because, let's be honest, most normal people, to say nothing of a federal agency like the FCC believes that YouTubing is a real job. It's not something they give a crap about protecting. So how does this impact me personally and this channel going forward? Well, as I said, I've already had to mark a whole bunch of existing videos as being intended for kids. I don't think it's going to too heavily affect what I will or won't upload. So, like, for instance, I'm going to take my kid to see Frozen 2, probably next weekend. And I will most likely do a review on that, and I will have to mark it as something intended for kids. Now, part of this, you know, has to do with the fact that I lean much more heavily on my Patreon than I do on my YouTube income in terms of trying to get myself to a point where this could be my living. And Patreon wouldn't be impacted by this, obviously. But, so that's the first thing. Other than that, it's probably not going to have an enormous impact on the channel, barring two specific outcomes. And these are things that I am not going to make preemptive changes, but I am going to keep a very close eye on when the rules go into effect and how they are being enforced. So the two possibilities that would definitely impact the way I do this channel would be if Doctor Who is considered to be children's entertainment, and therefore anything talking about it would be considered appealing to children, and whether or not my background, which does feature toys, is enough in and of itself to get any video in which this background appears marked as being appealing to kids. Now, in regards to that second one, I think it helps that this background is not excessively evident in my thumbnails, and like, I'm not talking about these toys. They are, however, present, and there are some YouTubers who have made the moves to remove any collectibles or toy sort of things from their background, or at least have said that they were going to do that. I don't know how many actually have. That's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Like I said, I'm not going to preemptively dismantle my background, but I am going to be keeping a very close eye on that to see how that starts panning out. And that will obviously affect my presentation. If Doctor Who gets considered to be children's entertainment, that might... I honestly don't know what I would do if that ends up being the case, because that is, at this point, half my output. Out of 4 videos that I release per week, sometimes I do more, but it's a minimum 4 videos a week. 2 of those are Doctor Who related. And so if 50% of my output is suddenly clipped and not easily found or viewable by my subscriber base, and is going to be receiving less monetization effectively, that's going to put me in a tough spot. And may drive my reformatting some of what the channel ends up being. But remember how I talked about, you know, anything perceived to be appealing to kids, and also me having the open question, will Doctor Who be considered for kids? And that's part of the thing. These rules are super vague in terms of what they consider to be appealing to kids. And with something like Doctor Who, some people call it a kid's show. I would call it a family show. I don't believe it's a program directly aimed at kids. But if the FCC, in its infinite wisdom, decides that Doctor Who is a show for kids, then anything I make talking about it needs to be marked as something for kids. And the lack of clarity, because there's a lot of gray area here. Like, a lot of the stuff I already marked. She-Ra, fine. Disney, Pixar, How to Train Your Dragon, fine. I'm talking about something, a piece of entertainment that was made for kids, therefore my discussion of that thing may come up in, you know, a kid's search for anything related to that, fine. But is Doctor Who for kids? Is Marvel for kids? Is Star Wars for kids? They certainly appeal to kids. They have large kid fandom bases. And the thing is, we're not going to get a lot of clarity on this until it starts being put into practice. Because that's just the way the dang thing's been written. So, the first thing is, if you yourself have any content up, some people are removing all their content, which strikes me as excessive. Actually, I'll back up. Your content should not have to be removed, provided two things. Anything that has the possibility of being considered children targeted, you have it marked as such, and the contents of that video do not venture into, this clearly is not okay for kids to see. So people who it may be in their best interest to remove their content will be anybody, say, talking about She-Ra and swearing about it in a video. They're probably going to want to take that down. Or any adult talking about SpongeBob SquarePants because it was their favorite show going up and they still talk about it. They better not curse or be making dirty jokes when they talk about it. A YouTuber who I really like, the Dom, or it's Dominic Noble, I think he just changed it to that. He has a number of review videos about adaptations of children's media. Like, for instance, he talks about the adaptation of The Last Unicorn. He does it for Neverending Story. And I'm pretty sure in both instances, he swears. Those videos are probably going to need to be taken down. And again, like, I do understand where the guidelines for the rules come from. Because unless you have marked an item as for 18 and up only, which is not a feature most people use and also means you can't monetize it, then if a child is searching for something on The Last Unicorn, they might get Dominic's video. And it's not meant for them, but as far as the FCC is concerned, it doesn't matter. It would appeal to them, which means they might end up watching it, and they shouldn't be. And unfortunately, this is just kind of an offshoot right now about how this works. So, like, in terms of normal television, which is what the FCC is used to regulating, that it's easy to counter the what about the children issue whenever you're dealing with, say, a premium cable channel or airing past a certain time of night. So, like, Adult Swim. I mean, Cartoon Network has a lot of appeal for kids, but the Adult Swim block, which is very adult at times, airs so late, it's not reasonable to expect the Cartoon Network to be protecting children at 1 o'clock in the morning. They shouldn't have to, and they're not expected to. But because you can't control when someone comes across your stuff, and if it's on YouTube, it's searchable, and people can get it. And there is YouTube Kids, which theoretically restricts kids' stuff and what they have access to, but, how many people freaking use that, So, I get why. But, and I don't, I get the issue they're trying to address, but this is going to screw over a lot of people, potentially myself included, depending on how this thing goes. Is there anything that can be done? Honestly, not really. But if you want to give it a try, like I said, the FCC is still taking public comments. I'll put a link down below for where you can do that. If you do leave a public comment, do not make threats and do not curse. You will not be helping if you do that. But also, between that and there's a change.org petition, you can do those things. I have no belief that they will help because we went through this already with the FCC. We went through this with net neutrality, where so many of us worked so hard to bombard that public comments explaining why the loss of net neutrality was a horrible idea. They didn't listen. They're not going to listen now either. The public comment phase of this thing is not because they want our feedback. It's because they're required to do it to some degree. They've already decided what they're going to do. They're just going to do it. And we will know, starting in January, what this will be like. Beyond that, the other thing that you can do, and I mentioned this in my terms of service video as well, is if there are content creators who you strongly believe in and you greatly enjoy their content, consider supporting them in whatever off YouTube means that there is. If they have a merch store, consider picking up some merch. If they have a Patreon page, consider supporting them there. This platform has never been the most stable thing in the world, and it's about to become far, far less so. So if somebody makes content that you enjoy and you want to help ensure that they keep doing it, whether it's me or anybody else, finding a way to support them outside of the confines of YouTube is probably the best thing you're going to be able to do right now. So that's my thoughts and my breakdown of this freaking mess. What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Buttons, links, like, subscribe, all that usual stuff. I do have a Patreon, you might have guessed. Link for that below. We'll see what happens. I normally try to end feeling a little bit more upbeat, but this has the potential to wreck so much. And I don't think the FCC realizes that what this is going to actually create is far less children's programming on YouTube. People just won't do it. Because it'll be so closely monitored and also less profitable, there will simply be less of it. And channels will move to creating strictly adult entertainment. There will actually be less stuff for kids. And I understand that's partly the idea. They want to ensure that things kids shouldn't be watching. But even the stuff that was designed for them, a lot of it's going to go away. Oh well. Whatever you feel like doing about it, links, buttons, comments, go ahead. But you also don't have to, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings for as long as I can continue to manage it. And until next time, this council is adjourned.